Here is Dieter Gantenbein from IBM from Switzerland. Can you hear me? Super. You see the first slide, me with an electrical car on a charging spot and a very small miniature wind turbine and the vision of 1 million EVs on a panel, right? So right now, as we are playing with electrical vehicles in Denmark and in Switzerland, not reaching so many EVs, the EVs are no challenge to the electrical grid. But as we will have more EVs, the EVs in themselves being very efficient energy-wise, very clean, no dust in the cities, but they will become a challenge to the distribution grid. At the same time, the battery of the car has the same characteristics as our heating system and some of our cooling systems. They are thermal and chemical processes. They don't need instant service from the electrical grid. Some of these loads can be time shifted, and that's the regulation power which is inherently attached to these flexible energy consumers. And the second thing that's also more or less visible in the picture is the charging infrastructure. Does it have to be expensive, or can it be the usual grandmother plug that we use anywhere in the world that delivers the raw analog power? And can we assume that the smart energy resources in the picture, the electrical car, will be more modern and less old than anything which is deployed? We assume, our hypothesis is, the cars of the world will be more uniform than the charging infrastructures. We have the same brands of cars all over the world, but the basic plugs are not standardized. And so we would expect that any Mode 3 communication will be very late in its rollout and not desirable to depend, that the smart grid depends on the communication skills of the charging infrastructure, but rather that the interested demand-responsive devices like the heat pump, the car, etc., they will find internet telecommunication access to the virtual power plants out of band, and therefore the charging spot can be very cheap. And given that most cars do not drive more than an hour a day, if for over 20 hours a day they are connected inductively in the future with the visible cable today, then the charging does not need to be fast. It can be as slow as you want, and anywhere, anytime that it's good for the grid. And that gives a payback for the electrical energy that the car consumes. And from a grid perspective, the car is a very flexible consumer and not at all aggressive, and probably gets a payback for regulation power. And with this, switching to chart number 2, with this overall vision in mind, we participate in the Danish smart grid projects and in the European projects in Austria and Switzerland. And it fits well the IBM overall Smarter Planet strategy, where the analog grids of the world today should get enriched by, on the left, transform the grid to a more digital infrastructure. Secondly, empower the consumer side, the end users. And thirdly, foster the carbon neutral energies, the cleaner energies, and in particular also make the grid operation internally more efficient and maybe also more internally green. So what we have, chart number 3, what we have launched in 2009 and completed the end of last year is a smart grid demonstration, a pilot on the Danish island Bornholm. It is a small island for only 40,000 people. There is a high voltage interconnect visible in the picture to Sweden in the north. So this island is between Sweden and Germany, and it has a local power plant using fossil gas as its ammunition. But normally the generation is somewhere in Europe outside, or the bluish wind turbines on the island. The stability of the power grid is through the cable, where all of Europe is in the same frequency zone. Actually, there are two different frequency zones, but the frequency stability, the rotational mass, this is all maintained outside the island. In this mode, the blue installed green renewable energy in this geography, it's the wind, is more than 100% on average than what the island needs. In the summer, the island needs 35 megawatt, in the winter 55, but the generation is above 55 on most days, because Denmark is very windy. But it happened in 2004 that the high voltage interconnect was cut by fish trawlers in this not very deep sea between Sweden and this island. And then the island had to operate ice landing, and the gas turbines had to start. But they did not only create the missing energy, but they were in charge of making the grid stable. And the operators at the utility of the island called Østkraft, they tell us the grid is not stable if there is more than 15% wind. So what we have investigated in this Edison project is what would it take to have at least 50 or maybe even more than 50% wind on such an island, even if it's ice landing, to give more green content readily available, but keep the grid stable and reliable. And in 2009 and also today, the expected cars from different OEM manufacturers just did not arrive yet. So we actually had a dozen electrical vehicles, and we had micro-simulated 1,000, and in the simulation overall, for the 40,000 people, 10,000 electrical vehicles. We simulated the 3 voltage levels of the grid of this island and the injected profile of EVs. And the later charts you see will show some of the results. In this consortium, IBM had the role of creating the smart grid software, and the dozen electrical vehicles from Renault and Tesla and Citroën, they were running on the same software, and the software would not see the difference between a real EV and a micro-simulated EV. Chart number 4. As stated on the introductory chart, the typical EV refueling time is too long. Nobody wants to wait 20 minutes or longer just for backing up, topping up the battery. So you want that the EVs refuel when they are parked for whatever reason, and so you want ubiquitous charging anywhere, anytime. You have at least a modest 110, 220 voltage near the parking lot. And in Europe, in many geographies, that's easy to do, but we do not want to restrict such charging to the available Mode 3 infrastructure. And Mode 3 is not sufficient, it's not fast enough for the rare cases where the car drives more than 100 kilometers a day. For that, you need really very fast charging, and such DC charging is like an insurance that you need 1 or 2 times a month. It is not that green. It's too aggressive for the grid in most situations. It may age the battery in the long term. So the ubiquitous slow charging is best for the battery and best for the time it takes for the driver. And therefore, the slow charging means that most cars are ready to do up and down regulation in many hours of their life. Chart number 5. So here you see the resulting smartphone app or web app you can have on your tablet, phone, or browser. You see 4 quadrants in the core where you see the state of the battery. The map can be zoomed in. You can manage your fleet of cars or just your single car. But the key thing elaborated on this chart is there are 3 modes that the car driver or fleet operator can put the charging for the car in. Normally, it should be intelligent and smart. That should be the default. But any driver that needs it can immediately get the charging. So he just selects immediate, and you see that at 9:29, when the car plugged in with 30% state of charge, he gets the blue charging window as he requests it manually. He can override the system. He has given, we have in many geographies different tariffs for day and night, which are historic tariffs. He can also go in what's called here the premium, where he connects, but by default will only recharge at night when the power is half the price, and in particular when the system has lots of unused green capacity, like nightly wind power. And then what goes into the battery is really the wind power at night. And instead of paying for 100 kilometers driving something like $15 for combustion driving, you will pay in Switzerland and Denmark something like $3.50 for recharging the battery for 100 kilometer driving. If you do it at night, it cuts in half and you're below $2. And the default that most cars should take is the bottom one, where you see the charging schedule over the next 48 hours pre-planned for your car based on the state of charge of your battery and respecting your historic driving. These patterns would then be used to predict your future trips and assert that the battery has always enough charge for your expected next trip. So if a driver goes out of the usual, wants to explicitly force a new pattern, on that very day, he may switch to immediate charging, but then already on the second day, the system has learned and automatically is doing the right thing. Now, chart number 6. So you see the same car depicted at the bottom. The car is on the charging infrastructure most of the time when it is not driving, and it can connect to the virtual power plant, which is the grayish box in the middle, through the charging infrastructure to the third-party actors behind Mode 3. But the car can also be an always-on car where the state of the charged location communicates to the OEM servers and B2B from those OEM servers into the VPP. And if the future EV driver can remotely control when the car charges from his smartphone app and preheat and pre-cool before driving when it's still power connected, then this privilege can be delegated by the driver to the utility. If the driver can do it, he can delegate it. So why not give this privilege directly from the OEM to the driver and fleet operator selected retailer providing regulation power operating such a VPP. And as you can see, the VPP has as the key functions the aggregation of such individual distributed energy resources into a portfolio, and then acts on the markets by placing energy requirements, but also providing regulation power, which in turn is requested by the transmission service operator, TSO in the picture, to the market, and the VPP provides the regulation power, and then the TSO, for the bits of regulation power received, will activate in real time to the balance responsible party box inside the VPP, and then this becomes the need, the signal to follow, and such dynamic set point is then indicated to the basic Edison Virtual Power Plant EVPP, and that aggregation then with the portfolio of cars will make sure that the particular consumption is followed for any point in time, and by having some EVs charge less, you can do up regulation. By having the fleet charge more, you can do down regulation, and it's very easy to reach enough cars, and this way the available renewable energies, whether it's wind in Denmark or solar in other geographies, can be immediately absorbed, and if there's not enough energy, the additional consumption on the electrical grid coming from these new loads, being the electrical cars, can remove and even give back in V2G into the grid. We have in this consortium played with a few V2G enabled cars, and that's very easy to extend this VPP optimization to. If you switch please to chart number 7, you see the result of such operation. On the bottom you see variant A. When Denmark today has a single tariff, the kilowatt hour costs the same all of the 24 hours, all year, same price, for an entire quarter of the year, the same price. Then you see the orange peaks in the morning and in the afternoon, evening, where to the gray base load, the new electromobility load just adds to the peaks and makes them steeper. Switching to variant B, where Denmark thinks that dynamic prices is the future, you see that if you, for fairness reasons, pre-announce these varying prices for each hour, for each 15 minutes, then in today's easy to automate environment, all the cars will switch to the nightly hours. For example, at 2 o'clock in the morning, when the kilowatt hour price is just half a cent cheaper, and then you see the spikes in orange occurring at night that are more aggressive than anything you had seen in the left picture. The conclusion is dynamic prices in its own right it's a good thing, but it doesn't yet make the overall system stable, because you can have correlated loads doing more aggressive switching activation than ever in the past before. And we are in the central picture showing the result of a simulation where we assume that the cloud services get for each load the state of charge of the battery, as well as the distribution grid congestion state, as well as the overall dynamic market prices and regulation power needs, and compute. For this island, Bornholm, we were able to do the 15-minute planning in 4 minutes on a portable computer. So with central computing, you could this could scale a little bit. The major disadvantage is probably the privacy, where the state of each individual flexible load, including the electrical vehicles and the households, needs to be in a central computing. The computation can be distributed, but the privacy is required, is challenged. And in this Edison project, we show a partial result, namely that if you have all the data available to the optimization, you can reach a stable smart grid in this economic dealing that the regulation power provided by each individual car makes the driving even cheaper for each individual. And so, let's say, instead of $2 for the 100-kilometer electricity you need, you would get money back. And that would cross-subsidize the investment and amortization that the car has on the battery purchasing side. And so the smart mode, where the cloud, the grid decides on the best charging schedule for each individual, is making the driving, the electrical transport more cheap, cross-financing, and the grid gets regulation power from the distributed loads. We have a follow-on project in Denmark funded by the European Commission that's called EcoGrid, where instead of such a central planning, we are further distributing the decision-making based on a price incentive, where there's a locational price. So both the overall grid state and the locational congestion get mapped into price adders, and then we try to reach stability under those protocol conditions.
Excuse me, Dieter, can you hear
chart
me?
8.
Excuse me, Dieter, can you hear me?
What we have tested in actual pilots is, the bottom one of the picture is that renewable energy, depending on the geography, it's either wind or solar power, is the input that's fluctuating, and on the consumption side, it triggers the need to respond, and depending on the scenario, it's the electrical vehicles, the cooling or the heating, that is the chemical or the thermal process that needs electricity as input, but is time flexible and can help through such a VPP solution, software ICT solution, to help keep the grid stable, to complement existing grid management techniques and make the peaks less aggressive, the regulation power more economical, and overall allow to inject the renewable energies that fluctuate so much. And you see our website where we have reference to a few more projects. And it's my pleasure to having been able to present you this overview, and would be ready to have questions. Thank you.